A recording of the webinar will also be sent to everyone later today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Carl Oliveri, Partner and Construction Practice Leader at Grassi. Carl, please take it away.
Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon and welcome everybody to our webinar in association with the BTEA. It's nice to see some familiar names and some new names on the attendee list, and I thank you for your time. As mentioned, my name is Carl Oliveri. I'm the Construction Practice Leader and a partner at Grassi. We're an advisory and accounting firm located in New York City. I've been working with construction contractors for the past 20 years, and to say the industry has changed over that amount of time would be a vast understatement. Today's webinar is designed to discuss the results of our 2019 Construction Industry Survey, and hopefully this will give you some insight into the industry trends others are contending with and help you understand where your company falls within this as well. Before we go any further, I would just like to take a moment to thank Lou Coletti and Lena Vega and the entire BTEA for partnering with us on this topic. The survey reflects the responses of over 100 industry insiders. The breakdown of that is 82% were either general contractors or subcontractors, and the remaining 18% were construction managers, trade educators, or employed by professional service firms. So we did have a nice cross-section of participation. 64% of the responders were employed by construction firms that have been in business for over 30 years, 25% in firms that have been in business from 10 to 29 years, and then 11% were firms in business for less than 10 years. 11% of the respondents said their firm revenue was less than $5 million. Close to half, approximately 48%, indicated their revenues were between $5 and $49 million. 26% said their revenues were between $50 and $199 million, and the remaining 15% had revenues in excess of $200 million. So again, from a demographic standpoint and revenue standpoint, a really nice cross-section of the New York City construction industry. Our study was self-administered with questionnaires that we completed online. We were the research sponsor. We supervised the development of the survey, and our Fellerman's Research Services managed the project and calculated the results independently. We kept the survey open from April through June of 2019. So the top issues in the industry today, as cited by you, our respondents are listed here. We asked them to comment about these concerns. So as you can see, the regulatory environment was the most frequently cited at 25%. Then we had a three-way tie for second place as it related to the continued union versus non-union migration, the difficulty of finding and keeping qualified labor, general business conditions rounded that out, and that was followed up very closely by soaring insurance costs and how all of these issues really impacted project overruns and delays. I drilled down into the regulatory environment for a moment, and what I found here was that a lot of the concerns were surrounding Local Law 196, the new safety laws, and how's this going to be monitored, enforced, and ultimately, what is the impact going to be to operations? Excuse me. But the regulatory environment, I'd like to caveat in saying that it does have far-reaching effects. It does get out of operations and into financial reporting and compliance. Remember, regulations also do mean the changes in revenue recognition and the changes in the Tax Act from a couple years ago. I went back and I took a look at our 2017 survey, and what was interesting was the top three issues back then were shrinking margins, the open shop migration, and the labor shortage and ownership transition. So while in two years since we did the last survey, things have changed, the issues on the forefront of the industry's mind haven't changed too much in that time period. When asking about project cost overruns and delays, 68% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed construction projects are taking longer to complete. 62% agreed or strongly agreed that the projects, when they complete, are coming in over budget. I found this very interesting because by all accounts, we're still in a construction boom or renaissance, if you will, within Manhattan. So I reached out and I spoke to some industry executives here. And what I found was that the issues seem to be centralized around three issues. The first one being insurance. And we've all heard the horror stories there. So I'm going to spare the narrative about rising insurance costs for the time being. Those are well documented that we're in a hard insurance market. The labor shortage was the second cited issue, talking to some industry executives, which we'll drill down into in a moment. But then the third I found was interesting was changes in material prices have also been cited, specifically where delayed projects were bid and awarded with outdated quantity costs or amounts. Projects that kicked in 18 and 19 are slated to begin in 20. There are some instances where the contractors are having to absorb these changes. I promised you we'd talk a little bit about the skilled labor shortage, and here we are. 71% of our respondents agreed or strongly agreed the skilled labor shortage has obviously led to higher labor costs. 86% agreed or strongly agreed that hiring less qualified or unqualified has led to lower quality of work and led to safety issues. Again, no one on this call, this webinar, would be surprised to hear. What I've drawn from this is as the labor shortage continues, contractors are supplementing their draw of skilled resources from an already diluted pool by using less qualified labor, which is directly impacting profitability. When I looked at our last survey, the needle on this issue really hasn't moved much at all. As we've seen baby boomers retire and more individuals transition their careers and lives away from construction, there's just not a replacement labor pool interested in an industry that has the opportunity for entrepreneurship. We're seeing contractors today develop new ways to attract, train, and retain talent that's got to go beyond college recruiting, because that's not going to be enough. I always advise industry executives, find smart people. You could train them within the construction industry. Get people who want to be engaged within what you do. When we talked about the positions that construction companies are looking for, we found that foremen, project managers, and estimators were the most challenging positions to fill. 76% of the respondents said foremen were difficult or very difficult, followed by project managers and then estimators. Of these three positions, more respondents said finding estimators was very difficult compared to foremen and project managers. Not surprising, 56% of the respondents said the skilled laborers were very difficult to find. And again, not surprising as well, IT personnel, office personnel, little easier to find them than the skilled labor pool within the marketplace. I briefly touched upon the need to develop programs to recruit, train, and retain younger workers. And a large majority of the respondents, when we asked about this, strongly agreed that the industry needs to fund and develop programs to pull this demographic into the industry. The growth within the industry over the last few years is well documented, as are the labor struggles. We know there's not enough tradespeople to meet the demand. We know that younger people today are looking at tech-savvy or white-collar careers rather than coming into this industry where they get a middle-market job and they learn a skill which they could translate to other opportunities in their lives as well. The growth is great and we want to continue with that growth, but we need to really have the industry focus on developing the future construction executives of tomorrow. And by the results of this question, that need is perceived and being addressed within the market. When it comes to the share of non-union work within the marketplace over the past 12 months, 46% of the industry professionals felt that non-union and open shop work had greatly increased in the residential sector. They also indicated non-union and open shop share is increasing in the non-residential sector as well, but at a slower pace. And nearly half felt there have been no change in the civil infrastructure sector. Again, the results here I was not too surprised with, where the open shop building is occurring in the residential and non-residential sector. I was surprised to see 30% of the respondents seeing an increase within the civil infrastructure segment. Speaking with some executives about this, they felt that the residential and non-residential markets slowing down, and the next phase of New York construction will be in the infrastructure. That migration of the open shop contractor to that subsegment is going to be a natural progression. So in a year from now, I'd be curious to ask this question and compare both sets of data and see how that's changed. Clearly, the majority of respondents expect this migration to continue. 87% felt that this was going to continue on through the end of 2019 and 2020. The general consensus of union versus non-union is going to continue. The feelings about it were expressed in one of the open-ended questions were really impassioned. One of the quotes really jumped out at me, and I'll share that with you, and said that the reality is the competitive landscape between union and non-union contractors is changing on all types of projects, which in most cases impacts bids, the bottom line, and has forever changed the industry landscape. I bet if I was able to ask that individual a follow-up question, and that follow-up question is, do you feel things would ever go back to where they were? The answer would clearly be no. Shifting gears over to compliance, specifically on the NWBE requirements, we asked respondents, how challenging is it to comply with these requirements today? Not surprisingly, over half said it was difficult or very difficult. 13% said it was easy, where a third, 34%, said it was neither easy nor difficult. I would have personally expected more than half to be in the difficult or not difficult section. When I went back and I pulled our 2017 data, the results have not changed too much, as the identification of qualified MBEs is the primary issue within compliance. It's evident that construction companies are still struggling in identifying and determining which MWBs are available to perform, have the best and right skills to meet project needs, while still remaining compliant on the requirements and actually trying to remain profitable on their job as well. Sticking with compliance, the next question we asked was, what's the impact of 240 and 241 on your bottom line, the scaffold law? The consensus was generally negative, not surprisingly, and assessment of the scale of the impact did vary depending on the industry professional answering the question, but overall 42% felt the impact was negative on their bottom line. 46% felt it was slightly negative, and 12% felt it was not negative at all. More on how this is going to be transitioned into the contractor's financials in a few moments. As I mentioned before, when we discussed the regulatory environment being the #1 concern for the New York City contractor today, local law 196, when I probed a little deeper, was at the forefront of everybody's mind. So of course we asked a question about how contractors today are contending with local law 196 and how it was impacting their business. As you can see from the data, 63% said they were factoring these compliance costs into their bids. After that, 60% of the respondents felt that safety training and investing in safety training was going to be their primary focus to contend with local law 196. 40% felt that they were going to hire in-house safety personnel, whereas 36% was going to hire an outside safety consulting firm. 29% were going to look into technology, and there's some pretty cool technologies out there when it comes to safety. They were going to look into investing in technology to help supplement their safety programs. As you can see from these responses, the compliance with local law 196 is encompassing a wide array of methodologies and tools. Respondents have shared with us that the scrutiny of regulators has really had the most impact on the development and implementation of their safety. I took that to mean we're not sure how we're going to be regulated, so we're taking our best guess as to what we need in-house to comply with this law. The second most impactful driver in the development of safety programs, again, speaking to industry executives, was assessing the subcontractors' prior safety record and performance before working on them as well. Overall, while they may differ, the conclusions executives are coming to regarding safety, there is a safety-focused mindset in place to develop the right program to enhance and protect the labor force, which is nice to see in the intent of this law. We then shifted our gears and we spoke to our respondents about technology. I jokingly say we have new ways to build, new ways to audit when discussing construction technologies today. And not surprisingly, when we talked about the attitudes of the different technologies out there, we did get a wide response net. The professionals today, they acknowledge the value of continuing the investment in technology, but their opinions really did differ as far as investing and delivering and implementing the costs and how to use this to supplement and offset labor costs. For example, 84% of the respondents either strongly agreed or agreed that adopting technology was a good investment for their business. 78% agreed or agreed technology was a skill set they looked for in new hires today. Pretty positive data right there. But fewer agreed or strongly agreed that technology was helping offset their labor costs, and about 1 in 5, 20% agreed or strongly disagreed that they wanted to invest in technology. And then 36% were still assessing what technologies would work for them and if they should invest. I typically have found that the attitude with investing in technology is you cannot measure the ROI, or we have to work towards measuring that ROI. Again, going back to our 17 data, the attitude towards that technology is shifting. That is evident with some of these results. In 17, less than 1% of companies' annual revenues were invested in technology initiatives. So now we're starting to see the cutting-edge contractors employing emerging technologies to develop those alternative and new ways to build and deliver on projects. Also, it's a great means to attract talent, transmit data from the job site to the office, to really break down those silos between our company personnel, and to promote a safety culture. I would challenge everybody on this webinar, think of your own companies and think about how you're using construction field technology to further this trend and what else you could do to enhance your use of technology within your organization. With technology comes one of the hotter trends out there today, and unfortunately not in a good way, that's cybersecurity and the related cyber insurance challenges. Construction companies today, relying, like every other country today, company today, are relying more and more on data as the core decision maker in their business. It's not surprising to see an awareness of cybersecurity risks in general, but we're not seeing the awareness of cybersecurity risks filter down into the job sites as much as we should. Accordingly, 45% of our respondents agreed or strongly agreed that construction projects today are increasingly susceptible to cyber crimes. And 76% said that the number of people with access to work site data was a significant security concern. 62% of respondents said they have an internal policy to protect data on laptops or mobile devices, whereas half of the respondents had cyber insurance against data breaches as well. Of those that didn't have cyber insurance, 48% said they plan to buy it within the next 12 months. There has been an uptick in the cyber threats and attacks in the middle market construction over the past few months. The mentality is, I'm too small, that a hacker's going to bother with me, and that's exactly what a hacker is banking on. Someone once told me there's 3 types of companies when it comes to cyber attacks and threats and cyber attacks. Those who've been hacked and have done something about it, those who've been hacked and done nothing about it, and those who've been hacked and don't know it. So you can draw the common trend there. The insurance is a good, useful risk management tool, assuming you have the proper coverage, including third-party breach coverage. But the best way to combat these threats is to conduct a penetration test to identify where your company is vulnerable and also to create awareness. People are the weakest linked and exploited the most when it comes to cyber threats, but education and teaching people that it's okay to be skeptical and question that odd email that came from the CEO, that's okay. That's the best way to create a culture that's going to be immune to cyber attacks. Sticking with insurance for a moment, obviously the hard insurance market of New York City has been well documented over the years. We asked our respondents, because we had to, because it is a big issue, if the insurance costs were having an impact on the ability of their business to compete within New York City. 16% said this has been a critical consideration in their ability to compete within the industry. 58% said it has been a significant or very significant factor in their ability to competitively price bids. 22% said it's been somewhat significant, and only 4% said it has not been a significant consideration. I actually found this interesting. I would have thought 100% of respondents would have been in the very significant or critical category, as the horror stories continue on of 40 to 50% annual increases in general liability and umbrella policies year after year. Where did we see the most increase in terms of insurance coverage category? We saw almost half, 49%, saying it was sitting with general liability. Again, I don't think that's too surprising to anyone on this webinar. 31% felt they were experiencing the steepest increase in their umbrella and excess policy. 17% felt the biggest increase was with their workers' comp. And cyber insurance, which we just spent a few seconds on, only accounted for about 3% of the increases there. Again, I don't think we're seeing any trends here we were not expecting. The rising costs of insurance are a concern and a direct reaction to changing market conditions. When speaking to contractors today, like I mentioned before, they really are bracing themselves for annual increases from anywhere from 30 to 50% of the prior year premiums. We know that's difficult to recoup in a tight bidding environment. We are starting to see different solutions emerge, and more people lean towards jobs that are CSIP or OSIP or high deductible self-insured plans to combat some of these rising insurance costs. What's really interesting to me about this slide also is that cyber insurance was the lowest on the scale. Again, if I could fast forward into next year, with the high number of attacks and attempts we're seeing in the marketplace today, I'd be interested to see where these insurance premiums fall within this model. Okay. As far as estimated revenues for the next 12 months are concerned, Overall, there's a positive outlook for revenue for the future. The vast majority of respondents felt that future revenues would either remain the same or increase. Only 7% felt they didn't know where their revenues would fall, and another 7% felt that their revenues were going to decline over the next year. You know, we have some high-profile projects on the horizon between the non-residential and infrastructure sector. So these results really weren't too surprising. With forecasted construction spending within New York City to exceed $60 billion in 19 and 2020, the expectation is that revenue will grow over the next 2 years. But speaking to contractors and other industry experts, we're starting to see that inverse relationship where revenues are growing and margins are shrinking. Again, that is the restriction of the insurance, rising compliance costs, everything we just spent a few minutes talking about. Beyond 2020, it still seems a little bit foggy, but the conclusion to draw is that the construction contractor does have enough backlog in place to carry them through the next 18 to 24 months. So when we look ahead, what changes do you expect to see in the construction industry within New York City? Obviously, not surprising, the overwhelming majority, almost everybody, 96%, felt higher safety compliance costs was going to be a factor within their organization. 71% felt oversight from regulatory bodies would be a factor to contend with as we build in New York City going forward. And over half, 54%, believe the alternative delivery methods would be the most impactful. And by alternative delivery methods, the increased use of public-private partnerships, as we see how LaGuardia and JFK go on, joint ventures, tri-ventures, and just other alternative scenarios. Again, when I speak to industry thought leaders and executives about these changes, it really is apparent the regulatory pressure is high within the market and on the forefront of everyone's mind. The scrutiny of safety programs, non-compliance with contract language, how do we meet or show that we're trying to meet elevated MWBE participation, or just some of the matters today that you, the construction industry, have to navigate. You know, not only does falling down on any of these areas carry sledgehammer-like financial penalties, but the public scrutiny can be detrimental to your operations as well. So as a result, we're advising companies to really take steps to ensure you have robust compliance programs in place, proactively analyze your exposure to risks that could lead to issues that could be either financial or non-financial. We're seeing companies invest in compliance program, which is a combination of training and other education to their current employees. This may be only good and effective. As the regulations change and become more complex, there has to be that continued focus and reinvestment on staying compliant. And there may be a time where it's commonplace for every construction company to have a compliance officer in place. But one thing is clear, based on this slide, the construction contractor in New York City today cannot take a wait-and-see attitude as to what their next steps are. Well, I prepared for an hour and somehow or another went through an hour's worth of data in half an hour. So I do apologize for that. But before we open it to questions, if anyone has any, I'm going to thank you for your time today and participation. I'm going to give a big thank you to the BTEA for putting this together and being a valuable partner and a friend to Grassi. If anyone would like a copy of the survey, feel free to email us and we'll give you a copy. And of course, we're going to have this recording sent to everybody. That being said, if there are any questions or I have some time, I'd be happy to attempt to answer them.
Okay, Carl, it does look like we do have a few questions.
Okay, great.
One of them is, how are firms staying competitive, factoring in higher safety costs?
So I'm just writing it down so I can read it. No,
Oh, yeah.
I got it. So how are firms staying competitive while factoring higher safety costs? I'm like I'm liking it to. It's
Looks like we have another one. It says our company invested in new technology and is struggling to have project managers engage and have hired additional staff to accommodate. How are others handling?
So if I understand the question correctly, we have a new technology in place and the project people, the field people are not engaging or accepting it. And you're hiring additional staff, tech-savvy staff to help kind of champion this initiative. You know, in a situation like this really is a cultural shift and cultural mind shift. And as Management 101, and corny as it's going to sound, it is a tone at the top initiative where the culture from the C-suite has to be, we're adopting this technology because it's going to help us to build better, more effective, and more profitable. What you have to do is show those project managers how it's going to impact their jobs, and their financial stability from a dollars and cents standpoint to get them to buy in. You know, the technology is here today to break down that office field silo.
Okay, good. Doesn't look like there was any other questions submitted. If you do have any questions, if you could please take the time to submit them in the bottom right-hand corner, and we will make sure to answer them.
Oh, if not, my email address is coliveri, O-L, it's right there. There's my contact information. Feel free to email me or call me. I respond to everybody within 24 hours. I'll be happy to share a copy of the survey, have a separate conversation with you on some of the results, share any insights I can, and as mentioned, we will share a copy of this recording with everybody. And I thank the BTEA. I thank all of you for your time, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be ending the broadcast now.